I want to today talk about the matters of the heart. One of my favorite plays, musicals, is Fiddler on the Roof. I just love Fiddler on the Roof. My parents took me to go see that down at the Cape Cod Melody Tent when I was very young. And you know who played the lead? Leonard Nimoy. Huh? How do you like that? He was Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. And that was my first exposure, and I've seen it numerous times. And it's if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to do it. It's an incredible faith story. But there's a scene where back in that day, in this story, it's all about the fact that marriages were arranged. Marriages were arranged. And so Tevye, the lead, and his wife Golda, that was what happened to them. Their marriage was arranged. But now Tevye is faced with his oldest daughter, who has to get married first, with an arranged marriage, and she is pleading with him to not let that marriage go through because she is in love with somebody else. He's just not as wealthy. He's a poor tailor. And ultimately, Tevye says, okay. But the question begins to kind of haunt him a little bit. They're getting married for love. We didn't do that. So he begins to wonder, does my wife, Golda, love me? So he asks her that question. Golda, do you love me? She looks at him and says, do I what? Do you love me? And she says, sing. With our daughters getting married and there's trouble in the town, you're upset, you're worn out, go inside, go lie down. Maybe it's indigestion. No, Golda, do you love me? And the song goes through all of that and all that they've been through together and all the ways they have demonstrated love. So at the very end, Golda says, I suppose I do. And he says, then I suppose I love you too. It doesn't change a thing. But after 25 years, right, that's what he says. It's good to know. It's good to know. So we use the word love, don't we, in all kinds of things. I love lobster. I love my car. I love my kids. I love Marvel movies. Go figure. Spider-Man, right? I love Cold Stone ice cream. I love my wife. I love Big Bang Theory, the TV show. Certainly they're not all equal, right? I don't love them all the same. In fact, some are not really love at all. We just use the term, but they're only likes. And only some of the things I just said are matters of the heart. But because we tend to use the word love so loosely, I want to push us a little bit this morning. Do you love Jesus? Well, I suppose I do. How do we know? How do we know that we love Jesus? Well, actually, he tells us how, right? So, the scriptures do. So first, in 1 John 5, 1 through 3, first off it says, everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, right, is born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves his child as well. This is how we know that we love the children of God, by loving God and carrying out his commands. And I'm going to put this third verse up on the screen there, Brady. In fact, this is love for God. God, keep his commands. This is love for God. Keep his commands. And his commands are not burdensome. I want you to hang on to that. I'm going to leave that up on the screen for a little bit, but I want you to hear that passage in a paraphrase from the Message. Every person who believes that Jesus is, in fact, the Messiah, is God begotten. If we love the one who conceives the child, surely we will love the child that was conceived. The reality test on whether or not we love God's children is this. Do we love God? Do we keep his commands? The proof that we love God comes when we keep his commands, and they are not troublesome. So Jesus put it this way in John 14:15, if you love me, you obey my commands. That's simple. How do we know that we love Jesus? Do you love Jesus? Well, sure I do. I love Jesus. I love my mom. I love video games. I love the ocean. I love looking at the stars. So I feel like I got to change the question just a little bit this morning. The question I want to ask and I want us to answer, it's really a matter of the heart. Do you love Jesus in your heart? And it may make you feel a little bit uncomfortable here, thinking about it this way, but I think it's going to help refine the question that I'm asking. Because, in all honesty, saying, yeah, I love Jesus, that's too easy. Because we use the word love too loosely. So, I'm going to ask you not, do you love Jesus? But, are you in love with Jesus? Because that changes the question, doesn't it? I love lobster, but I don't love I'm not in love with a lobster. Okay? I love watching Big Bang Theory, but I'm not in love with it. I love my wife, but wait a minute. I'm also in love with her. In fact, I'm more in love with her today than when we got married almost 40 years ago. I don't even think I understood this type of love 40 years ago. I am in love with her. See, being in love implies a relationship. And that helps me understand better what I just read in 1 John. In fact, this is love for God, to keep his commands, and his commands are not burdensome. You see, I think sometimes we read this and we think, okay, I'm supposed to love Jesus, so I'm supposed to obey his commands. And because there's actually a list, right? God gives us a list. Here's my commands. Because there's a list, we can fall easily into the trap of checking off the list of things that we got to do to prove that we love Jesus. But that's not the way it works, is it, when you are in love with someone? I'm in love with my wife, so you know what I try to do? I try to bring her joy. And I know what brings her joy because we have a growing, loving relationship. So I want to bring her joy. Why? Because I'm in love with her. And this is some ways I do that. I put the seat down in the toilet when I'm done. She told me to say that one, by the way. I asked the question, what are the ways that I show you, I need, help me out here. I put gas in her car. I don't think she's put gas in her car for our entire marriage. Not once, I don't think. My wife doesn't drive on highways. There are reasons for that. But that means in order for her to see her father, I've got to drive her there. So I do that. And it brings her joy to see her dad, which brings him joy, by the way, which she wants to do because she's in love with her dad, right? But you know what I'm not doing? Checking off the list, counting how many times have I driven her to see her dad this month? I know it. It brings her joy, and it brings him joy, and I love him too, so it's not a burden, right? It's not burdensome. Why? Because I am in love with my wife, and I want to make her happy, and making her happy makes me happy. It's not a test. It's not a chore. There's no list. Okay, toilet seat down, check. Put gas in her car, check. Got it. Yeah. even when she drives me a little crazy. My wife gets up at 5:45 a.m. to go to work. I'm not even sure if there is a 5:45 a.m., so it's not really been a big part of my experience. You know how I know she loves me, that she's in love with me? Her routine to get ready in the morning is done in such a way that she doesn't put the overhead lights on. And when I get up, there is a nice fresh pot of coffee waiting for me. However, last week, my wife's alarm goes off at 5:45 a.m., as usual, and she reaches over to shut it off. But for some strange reason last week, this particular morning, instead of reaching over to the right, she got her directions misplaced, and she reached over to the left and shut off her alarm by whacking me in the face. Needless to say, that did not shut off the alarm, but it certainly created a new one. But I still love her because I'm in love with her, and we have laughed tears over that. It's a matter of the heart. Right? We were in Nashville this past week, and it goes both ways, and I go to get our tickets to fly home and print them out, and it's not working. You got to do that within 24 hours. You can do that. You got to wait till that 20, and it's telling me that I haven't reached that yet. Don't understand until I realized that I accidentally booked the flight home on December 7th instead of November, that Saturday. We got a whole lot more time than I ever want to spend in Nashville going on. So I come up and I go, I am sorry up front, because that was like a $300-400 mistake. But we're here. You understand what I'm saying? So are you in love with Jesus? And if that way of putting it makes you a little uncomfortable because you reserve it only for relationships that have romance and sexuality, I challenge you to rethink that. In fact, I'll say this, romance and sexuality tend to have a level of selfishness involved. Oh, I love the way you make me feel. I want you, I need you, oh baby, this, that thing. Yeah. I'm not talking romance. I'm not talking, but I am talking heart language. In fact, don't forget that the church, who's the church? The church is the bride of Christ. You are and I am the bride of Christ. That's not about romance. It's about the heart. Jesus is in love with you. Are you in love with him? I'm in love with my kids. Kathy and I have done things with them just to see the joy on their faces. You're a parent, you've been a parent, you know what that's like. Special birthday parties, Disney at Christmas vacations. The year I put together this big playhouse in the living room just so that they could see it on Christmas morning, and then I had to dismantle the whole thing, realizing it would not get through the door to be put outside. And we're not going, okay, where's the checklist? Got to do this to make them happy. We got to do that. Check. Okay, I guess we love them. No, because we are in love with our kids. And it brings me joy to bring them joy. It's a matter of the heart. Are you in love with Jesus? Listen to the psalmist. I'm going to put this verse up on the screen here. It's from Psalm 42. A lot of you know this verse. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? Do you hear the heart language? My soul thirsts for the living God. That's how much I want to be with him. Do you think the psalmist here is in love with God? Are you in love with Jesus? The good news is that unlike the psalmist, because of Jesus and the Holy Spirit, there's no separation. I am with you always, Jesus says. But are we always with him? Do we desire to be? Does our heart long just to spend time with him? And the more we do that, the more we want it. You know what I've also noticed? That when you're in love with somebody, you not only want to do what brings the other person joy, but your heart breaks when theirs breaks. Probably one of the most heartbreaking moments when our kids were young is I took Joshua and I worked together for Pinewood Derby. You know what that is? Now, if you ask Joshua working together for the Pinewood Derby, he will tell you about the time he thought I cut his finger off. And we had a medical emergency because of working on this car. But in truth, we got this car. We worked at it, and it was great, and it was fast. It wasn't the fastest car there, but we were vying for second place. And right near the tail end of this, one of the wheels kind of fell off, and we had to fix that. And the car didn't run quite the same way, and ultimately he took fourth place. You know what they didn't have a trophy for? Fourth place. And it was like we knew it. It was almost we could taste it. And it broke his heart, and he just started crying. And I got to be honest with you, I wanted to cry right along with him. It was heartbreaking. Didn't really help that at the same time Daniel was in a competition. Kathy was with him, and he won first place in a karate forms competition, and won a trophy that was taller than he was. It was about that big. It was about that big. You know, talk about multiplying the pain. You know, and I just wanted to cry with him because his heart was broken. And so my heart was broken because I'm in love with my kid. Are you in love with Jesus? Does your heart break for what breaks his heart? And what do you do when you're the one breaking his heart? When I was a teenager, I remember the day when my mom was saying something I really didn't want to hear. Parents tend to do that once in a while. I just began to talk back to her in a very, very disrespectful way. Because teenagers never do that, right? And she started crying because of the way I was treating her. I broke two hearts at that moment. Hers and God's, who says, honor your mother and father, right? And I apologize because I think God got a hold of me at that moment. And I apologize, and I don't think I started crying. And I don't think I ever treated her that way again. Why? Because I was in love with my mother. It was a matter of the heart. Are you in love with Jesus? Does your heart break when you sin because you know it hurts the one you love? Is that where your heart is? Because if you're in love with Jesus, the commandments aren't a list of chores that we have to do or we'll get in trouble. They're not a list of how we earn God's love. The commandments aren't a bunch of rules from a God who's just a killjoy, and just doesn't want to see us happy. The Bible is a love letter from a God who loves you so much, and the commands are the Creator's way to let his creation know this is what's best for you. Because that's all God wants for us is best. They're God's way of letting us know what brings him joy. And when you're in love with Jesus, obeying the commands isn't burdensome because bringing joy to someone you're in love with isn't a burden. It's a delight. It brings you joy to bring him joy. Isn't that amazing how that works? The thing is, you can grow up in church and not be in love with Jesus. You can know all the Bible stories and even memorize the Ten Commandments and not be in love with Jesus. You could be a great theologian and have spent countless hours studying the things of God and not be in love with Jesus. In fact, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 13, you can speak in the language of angels. You can understand mysteries and have all the knowledge of God. You can give everything you have to people who are in need, and you can have great faith, faith that can move mountains. But if you don't have love, if you're not in love with Jesus, it means nothing. It's worthless. But if you're in love with Jesus, everything changes. You change, and you keep changing. Your aspiration is to be like Jesus because you love him and you want to bring him joy. And when you become more like him, guess what? That brings him joy. When you're in love with Jesus, you begin to love what he loves. So church is different. Worship is different. Giving is different. Prayer is different. How you treat others is different. You forgive because it brings him glory, and there is nothing better than that. Every aspect of your life is seen through the lens of loving Jesus. Will this bring him joy? Will this bring him glory? And it's not a chore, and it's not a duty, and it's not a checklist. It's not a burden because it has become the joy of my heart to love Jesus, and I live for that. It's a matter of the heart. So here's the takeaway. If we demonstrate our love for Jesus by obeying his commands, like it says, Brady, put this one up on the screen. Right? What's the one area you need to be obedient in right now? I don't know what that is for you. It's different, right? What's one area in your life where you know what? I need to start being obedient to Jesus. Right? You thinking of something? And then, go to that next slide. What's that? Yeah, what's their slogan? Just do it. Right? One area. Just one. And obey the command, not because you have to, not begrudgingly, but simply to bring glory to Jesus. Are you in love with Jesus? Thankfully, we know he's in love with you. Let's pray. God, thank you. Lord, this changes everything. It's the question. It's the question of the ages. We know a lot, but it's not enough. We can learn a lot more. It still won't be enough. It's really a matter of the heart, God. Is our heart in line with you? Help us, God. Help us. We need your help in this, to be more in love with you and not just say, oh yeah, we love you. And let that pour out, God, in our lives, simply for the sake of glorifying you. Help us.